Hello and welcome to our Empowering Law Firm Leaders interview series, where we'll be talking to experts across the legal sector to discover the mindsets, behaviours, skills and digital tools that are needed to run a successful modern law firm. I'm Amy Bruce, host and head of marketing at Osprey Approach. And today I'm joined by previous head of risk and compliance at multiple SME firms, current chair of the Law Society's Money Laundering Task Force, and CEO and founder of Teal Compliance, who support law firms with their risk and compliance needs. Amy Bell, welcome Amy. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thanks for inviting me back.
Pleasure to have you. So today we'll be discussing why your law firm's compliance programme isn't as effective as it can be. We'll be covering how law firms can more easily ensure compliance across their firms. We'll also discuss best practices for creating a firm-wide culture of compliance, how to be a successful culp or culfer, and how to avoid SRA fines. But first, Amy, I know you've joined us on a previous series before, but please tell me a little bit about your background and experience that's led you to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a solicitor, been a solicitor since 1999. I can't believe how quickly the time has gone. And I started off, I trained actually in a small high street firm I was there for about 3 years. And then I went to a large Manchester city centre firm where we grew from about 250 to 750 people. So at a time of huge growth. And during that time, I was there as a fee earner for about 5 years, and then I took a sideways move into the compliance role. At the time, anti-money laundering was quite new, and so they needed someone to basically make sure everyone was compliant and teach on compliance as well. And so I took that role initially. Then I was gifted the head of learning and development for the whole company for all types of learning, as well as that. And so I did that for about another 7 years. So I was there 12 years. And what I realised when I was there was the advantages that large firms have that smaller firms don't necessarily have because of the scale that they can get to and the support they can tap into, like marketing, like compliance central services. And I was always concerned about the smaller law firms. How were they, when Culp and Coffer came in, the compliance regime for law firms came in 2011, how were they going to cope? Because we had a whole team doing it. And so that's when I left and I went to a network of law firms called Quality Solicitors that was established to essentially support the small firms, to give them access to big firm infrastructure, but as a small firm. And so I was completely solving the problem that I'd kind of been concerned about. So I went there for 4 years as their head of risk and compliance, and my role was really twofold. Number one, everybody in the network at the time rebranded as Quality Solicitors, so I was protecting the brand, in charge of risk there, so auditing firms, assessing them when they wanted to join, and ongoing monitoring of them while they were in the network, and then also a resource for them to be able to tap into. So I ran a helpline, used to do training for them and things like that, which I loved. That was my first kind of venture out into consultancy, and suddenly I had hundreds of firms and I got all of their compliance problems came into me, probably 2 or 3 calls a day. And so that gave me a huge amount of experience. It's quite hard to come by when you just in one firm, or 3 or 4 firms you might work in your career. I suddenly had hundreds of firms' problems that I was trying to help them solve. So it was really great insight. So I did that for 4 years, went for a little while into a law firm, a lovely law firm in Liverpool, as head of learning development and compliance. So the kind of job I'd done before. But I really missed the out and about and solving the multitude of problems that there were. So took the decision in 2017 to start out on my own. I started on my own for a little bit, and then about a year later, I was so busy that I thought I'm going to need a bigger boat, to quote Jaws. And so I got established Teal. And so Teal now has, I think, 14, 15 people in Team Teal, as well as some freelance people that are not here all the time, but here occasionally. And we probably help about 400 law firms a year. 400 to 500 law firms a year, and see thousands of people working in law firms through the training that we do. So yeah, I see a lot of different approaches, strategies, and as a result of that, I kind of, a few years ago, sat back and thought, what is common with all of these? What are the common problems that are having? And that helped me, I think, really start to drill down in how to provide support to firms that was really going to make a difference, rather than just ticking a box to say, oh, I've done the training this year, or I've done some file reviews. But how can we actually make that activity worthwhile in achieving better compliance and reducing risk?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, your experience means that you've seen everything, every which way I'm sure has come across your desk, and you're prepared for it all, which is exactly why you're here today. So yeah, again, thank you so much for joining me. We will be picking your brains over the next sort of 45 minutes to an hour. But if people can't stick around that long, I hope they can. If they've only got 5 minutes, what are the sort of top 3 things you'd say, or that you hoped everybody in a law firm knew about risk or compliance?
It's business protection, not business prevention. We often get a bad rep that where the computer says no people, but we're actually out there protecting everybody's jobs and the business. And the second thing is, compliance is simply a framework to protect people. So it's there, you know, the regulator will tell you it's there to protect clients. It's also there to protect the people that work in the law firm, because when I'm back in my fee earning days, I had claims, a couple of claims. They were not good days. They were awful. You want the floor to open up and swallow you. You want someone to take your badge back off you because you don't feel worthy of having it. You know, they're awful days, and compliance is about protecting your employees from that. And I suppose the third thing is, it doesn't have to be complex. There's nothing rocket science that I say. I'm not that clever. But what it does have to be, it's clear and easy to understand. A lot of people can get into jargon. Lawyers, we were always getting into jargon and overcomplicate things. Essentially, a compliance machine is, let's figure out how we want to do it, tell everyone how we want to do it, and then check whether it's working or not. And if it isn't, go back round again. There's nothing, it's not complicated, but everyone kind of, you know, you get risk matrix and all of these kind of things come in, SWOT analysis and stuff, all very useful tools. But I think sometimes people get scared by all of that. It's really keep it, you know, simple as you can.
Yeah, and I guess that leans into your idea of helping those SMEs and helping those smaller firms that don't have the in-house capabilities and don't have all these teams and people working on it. It's actually, what fundamentals can we get in and just make sure that they're doing the best they can?
Absolutely.
So we mentioned earlier, but you kindly joined us on our Build Better Habits series. And in that episode, I'd left the question about creating a compliance culture right to the end, which wasn't great for you because you had plenty to say. Culture is one of your largest cogs in your 6 C's of compliance. So I'm making sure it's a priority this way round, and making sure that we talk about this first of all. So you've made it your life mission to understand why compliance programs don't work so that you can build ones that do. So I guess, can you share your findings so far as to why you believe compliance programs aren't as effective as they should be?
Yeah, completely. Well, so you mentioned the 6 C's of compliance. There's quite a few components to it. Clarity on what you're expected to do, especially as a lot of us in the law, especially of my age and up, that might be owners of law firms, might have those compliance responsibilities. They entered the profession where we had a really thick rule book. The regulator for years, if you're in an SRA regulated firm at least, have been chopping away at that and moving from rules to principles, moving from telling you what to do to saying you've got to get this outcome. The result has got to be this, but how you get there is up to you. And so that's really challenging to figure out what's the right way to do it. So have you actually got clarity on what's expected? Do you resource it properly? And as you say, in the small firms, you will often have somebody who's the managing partner, who's the COLP, who's the money laundering compliance officer, who also has to do marketing, also has to do recruitment, and probably managing a team and some clients. I mean, can you resource it properly, and how might you resource it? Because we've got to get it working. It is a priority for the business, especially when we talk a little bit later on about fines. You know, it's something that you want to be able to know is sorted for you when you go to bed at night, but you've got all of these other jobs to do. So resourcing, capacity resourcing is the second cog. Then you've got communicating with people. Like I love policies, but I'm a geek. Right? So not everybody does like policies. I love a good meaty policy, a big meaty consultation. I like getting my teeth into it. Most people don't. most people just want to know what they need to do. Keep it simple. Tell them what they need to do. Tell them really clearly why it's relevant, why it matters. And often when people get pre-recorded training or they get a policy to read that's from a template, it's not relatable. And so they kind of just switch off. And then we wonder why they're not doing what we've asked them to do. They're just disengaged from the process. The smallest kind of piece of activity in my program of Compliance That Works, but one of the ones that has the most impact, is asking for commitment from people. So this is a really interesting phenomena. In the law, a solicitor, one of the first things you learn is if you say you will do something, that is an undertaking. So you don't have to say I undertake to do something, or even I promise to do something. Just saying I will do something means in your head as a solicitor, I better do that thing, because the breach of an undertaking is potentially career ending. It's subject to disciplinary if you breach an undertaking. It's so important to the trust the public places in the profession that our word is our bond. So those are the kind of 5 C's before you get to culture, which is the big one, right? So culture, you can do the other 5, but if you haven't got a culture that supports compliance, your investment in those other 5 steps will be wasted. It will absolutely be wasted. So I learned this quite early on in my compliance career, probably 3 years into my compliance career, and I've been going like 18 years now. And we had a process where we had centralised our typing pool. So, you know, when I joined the law, everyone had a secretary, and over the time, you know, one secretary did 3 people, 4 people, and eventually we got a typing pool. So the secretaries became paralegals or executive assistants, so they didn't do any typing. And we'd had all the lawyers in, train them all. This is now the new way of getting your typing done. We'd had all of the support staff in that weren't in the typing pool saying, now this is what your day job looks like. It shouldn't have any typing in it or amending or anything. It's got to go through to the central team. And I knew everyone in all 750 people, because if you started there or you did regular training, you got me. So I knew everybody. And people would come and tell me things. They'd like, oh, Amy, that's not working very well. And I got a call from a girl on one of the floors. And she said, oh, lovely lady, Julie, she's died now, bless her. She said, Amy, I need to just tell you about this other lady. Let's just call her Andrea. I need to tell you about Andrea. She's in tears. I said, why is she in tears? Lovely lady. I said, why is she in tears? She said, well, the fee earner she works for has insisted in front of everybody in the department that she does his typing. He wants to amend a document. He doesn't want to send it to the central team, and he wants her to do it. And she knows she's not allowed to do it because she's been on your training. He knows that she's not supposed to do it, but he's shouting at her and demanding she does it because she used to be a secretary, you know. And she's in tears. And I thought, oh my God, this is outrageous. So I kind of go to my boss and I'm like, what are we going to do about this? And of course, the considerations were, well, how much does he bill? Can we upset him? And that is a very common story about, and that goes to the root of the culture issue, because we have, as you know, obviously, if we don't bill, we don't get paid. We don't get paid, we can't employ anybody. So it's as simple as that, right? So absolutely, billing is important, and keeping people who are happy, keeping people who are big billers, you might think, is a good idea, until they do things that are non-compliant. You see, if you're valuing the billing at the cost of compliance, then compliance won't happen, and your investment in that will be wasted. There are some other really common things in law firms: the inability to even challenge that person. So never mind deciding not to challenge them because they're a big biller, but what are you going to actually say to them? The partnership model in law firms often means that, you know, you get to a situation where you want something to happen as a partner and you need allies around the partnership table. So if we're challenging people left, right and centre, you know, I'm not saying law firms are like Game of Thrones, right? But, you know, if you're challenging people and then they're like, well, you didn't vote for my thing for that time, so I'm not voting for yours. Nothing to do actually with what's right for the business, but to do with, I want my thing. Now, I'm not saying that, you know, a lot of my clients, this isn't a thing for them. A lot of a lot of firms have moved now towards recognising the good governance that you need in running a business to be able to make those difficult decisions that people might not be happy with, but they understand it's for the good of the business. But certainly historically, when we trained lawyers, we never train them to be able to have those conversations. So they find them really challenging and often, sadly, avoid them completely, these difficult conversations. There isn't that ability to do healthy challenge and make a psychologically safe place to be able to give your opinion and have that heard and, you know, either fed back, that's not the thing we're going to do, or, yeah, that's brilliant, great idea. And then I think the third thing, apart from, you know, letting big billers and prioritising billing, secondly, not being able to challenge people, thirdly, is that also connected to the hierarchical nature of law firms. So obviously I set off at 14 wanting to be a lawyer, and obviously my, you know, career goal was to become an equity partner as quickly as possible. I'll have made it, you know, if I become the country's youngest equity partner. And that was all I was focused on. Well, firstly, people aren't focused on that anymore. And there's quite a lot, I think, of still hierarchy in law firms. So the lawyers are the people who decide, they're fee earners. I mean, just calling them fee earners, I tend to call people just a full clump of lawyers, non-lawyers, nothing to do with earning fees, because without your support staff, you can't earn any fees. It's as simple as that. Even if you've got a completely lean model where you're using AI and voice recognition and stuff, you still need a cashier to manage your money going in and out, you know. We still need people to support us to be able to deliver legal advice. And sometimes those people doing those roles feel that they're not heard. And they're often the people that you are asking to comply. If they feel they're not heard, then they start to lose the kind of commitment to you. They start to feel quite aggrieved. And for compliance to work, you need everyone to believe in the mission of protecting clients, protecting everyone we work with. So again, another example from a lady who was a member of support staff in the firm I worked in. I'm now friends with her, been friends with her for years. She told me she moved to a new law firm. She was super excited that she was invited on an equal level to the away day, strategy in the morning, big kind of treasure hunt thing in the afternoon. She was like, this is amazing. No one's ever included me as a member of support staff in this kind of strategy stuff. They all go and have a day off and a night out, and we're just sat back at the office typing. She said, it was amazing. I loved it. I said, you know, I'm so pleased for you. She said, yeah. She said, until the next week. I said, why? What happened the next week? She said, well, they gave pay rises out. I said, oh, okay. What happened? She said, they gave all the lawyers 7%. They gave all the support staff 1%. And it was just a crushing message to her, because the week before she felt valued, the second week she didn't, you know, and the fact it was a percentage thing, you know, it wasn't like a number. And so sometimes we undo the good work. That firm was clearly had it on the radar to treat everybody in the business with respect. But sometimes we have unintended consequences of things that we do that upset people. They don't feel in the hierarchical nature they can say anything about that. And then they get other people, lawyers who have influencers, not following the program. And they're sat there going, well, I'm not going to tell anyone. Why should I tell anyone about this? You know, they don't care about me. So this is, you know, there's just so many pitfalls, and they're all connected. Nothing at all to do with compliance, but to do with how we relate to each other as humans and how we build the culture of the law firm. I mean, it is something, fortunately, and I'm grateful for, is rising up the kind of agenda. People, when I started looking at compliance at work, so 2020, I started talking about compliance at work. Culture, like, what do you mean? You know, and now we're getting to a place where people are starting to recognise that, you know, even if they do get their compliance right, their culture, if they haven't got that right, the impact of that isn't necessarily claims or complaints. It can be that. But it's recruitment. It's showing up in people, your staff turnover. It's showing up in your ability to attract the best talent. people now, the kind of the generation of lawyers that I used to interview for training contracts, you know, I mean, most of them have now got to partner, if I'm honest. It's a while since I did graduate recruitment, but the people I now might speak to who are just, you know, doing the SQE or they're looking for the training contracts, these people expect us to get this stuff right. And unfortunately, the lawyers have never been shown how to get it right. It's never been part of our curriculum as preparing to be lawyers, to think about culture. One of the most common things that I suggest to firms is, have you thought about having a dealing with difficult conversation program at all levels within the business, not just the kind of senior lawyers or complaints handlers, but everybody, so that everyone, including your support staff, feels able and confident to be able to challenge someone for non-compliance. And yeah, if I could say anything to anybody, was, if you think that people are having secret squirrel conversations and grumbling because you don't know how to have those open conversations, start there and follow through with it. Don't just put a training course on to tick a box, say we've done that and we care about it, and then not support people who do speak out. Yeah, if you could do that, then you would know straight away where compliance isn't working, because people will come and tell you. You have to wait for it to go wrong. The secretaries come and tell me all the time. When I do an audit for a law firm, I always meet with a member of the support staff and they tell me straight away what it's really like, even though they know I'm the auditor. But because I've sat and I've said, go on, tell me what's going on here. I see the processes, it's this, what's really happening. And they just tell me. Because they will, because they don't want to be in trouble for doing the wrong thing, right? They know. And in my experience, support staff are your greatest tool to support your compliance program, because they will gently remind the lawyers, you've not remembered to do this, you need to do that. And they just take their job incredibly seriously. And yeah, so I think that, yeah, there's obviously loads more of it than that, but those are my top three things that I think that we should do. Make sure you don't let rainmakers get away with it. Make sure that you facilitate people having conversations, and make sure everyone feels included and valued, so that they will contribute and help you get the intelligence you need about whether compliance is working.
Yeah, I love that. I'm just going back to your point, because it made me feel like it was some sort of compliance hack about the commitment, and getting them to actually state that, yes, I will commit to this and this is something I'll do. I think that's a really great piece of advice. But yeah, generally from a compliance perspective, you mentioned about allies, and I think that the culture underpins everything you want to do within a business, whether that's compliance or whether that's improving your client experience, or, like you said, a huge challenge of building the right team and getting the right talent through the door. You need allies throughout the business. You need allies in every department at every level. Absolutely. To make sure that you've got those ambassadors, that we're on the right track, we're meeting the compliance, you're meeting your brand values, you're serving the customers the way that we said we were going to. So I love that idea of having allies, and without that culture at the center of that, you're never going to be able to build those relationships or have that trust. I mean, trust and culture come hand in hand, don't they? So
they absolutely do. In fact, we're just about to send out our staff survey. It's about 20 questions, and I've never been surveyed working in a law firm ever in my life about how I feel about it, you know. And we used to win best companies, but you know, that's a whole other story for another day. But nobody actually really asked me how I felt about anything. Nobody really. And if it was a loaded question, like, complete this survey and we'll all get half a day extra holiday. And of course, then you're going, yeah, it's amazing here, love it. So we're just about to send it out as a business owner. So I'm a business owner that's had the same training as everybody else has had, you know, in my legal career. And then I decided to start a business. And one of the things that I was really committed to when I decided to start the business is I didn't want anyone here to feel how I knew all my colleagues in law felt: not protected, not listened to, not heard, not valued. And that has been kind of fundamental to me for day one. And we talk about people who join us from law firms. We have to go through a period of what we call decompression, so unlearning the rules that you learned before. So really quick example, there's a lady called Jo who works in my team, lovely lady. I've known her for years. We worked at the other firm together. And when she joined us, she came in and she gave me an appointment card. I said, what's this? She said, oh, it's my appointment card for the dentist. I went, why are you showing me that? She said, because I need an hour off next week to go to the dentist. And why are you showing me that? She said, well, that's what I've always had to do my whole career. I'm like, you're a grown-up, pal. I assume that if you need the dentist and you're going to take an hour off, that you'll make the time up because you know it's a quid pro quo. And I'm going to give you that flexibility. And I don't need you to prove it to me. I never make any of Team Teal ring in the morning to tell me they're sick. If you've been up coughing all night and you've just got to sleep at 5 in the morning, you don't want to set your alarm for 9 to ring me or your line manager to prove to them that you're poorly. Just, I'm going to take you at your word. And, you know, sometimes I speak to HR people about this and like, oh, well, you'll get caught out eventually, Amy. Well, I might do, yeah, but I haven't upset everybody else on the way.
Yeah,
I will take the chance of me having one person who takes the mick to make sure that the rest of my team feel valued. You know, and that's a decision. It's much easier to implement the processes. And this is a thing for compliance that works. We sometimes implement processes without really thinking, what are we trying to achieve with it? So you can end up with massively, this is what I'm saying about keep it simple, stupid, you know, not you're not stupid, but that's that saying, isn't it? Keep it simple, stupid. Because we put these complex processes in place and have all these unintended consequences when really all we want to do is make sure people, you know, doing what we want them to do, what they said they'd do, committed. And you're right, it is a complete management hack. Do you agree to do that? Because if not, I'm going to call you on it. And we all know that those are kind of the rules of engagement. We've all set that out. I've said this, you've said this, and you know, we're lawyers, it's a contract. I've said that you'll do this, you've said that you'll do that. I'm going to pay you for that. Let's just stick to that. And yeah, there's such a lot of stuff gets in the way of that. That yeah, it's people start to feel it's just a revelation when people join Team Teal because they're like, oh, so I don't need to do that. Well, like we have a Slack channel in the mornings, where it's called Where We Are. So I don't mind what time you work at Teal. We're obviously notionally we're open 9 till 5 and your contract says 9 till 5, 9 till 5, whatever it says. But I don't mind if you're a great morning worker and you love getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I did one of Team Teal, previous members of Team Teal, loved getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning. And when she woke up, she couldn't get back to sleep. So she just got up and started work. And eventually I had to say to her, you are clocking off at like 2 o'clock, aren't you? You're not working till 5 as well, are you? Because, you know, I'm not expecting you to do that. But that had been her practice. She'd been, you know, office hours where she worked before. She had to be available till 5 o'clock. And I'm like, well, this is nuts. You know, similarly, I like working at night. I'm much better working late at night when I've done everything, the kids are in bed and I can empty my head properly. I don't expect anyone to ever answer my emails at night time though. In fact, I say to people, I try and do delay send on them so that they don't feel pressured to respond to me at night time. But you just have to say where you are and let everybody know if you know. So we often see things on Where We Are like, I'm working from home today, but I'm nipping out at 3:30 for, you know, a school parents' evening or something. That's it. I don't need to see a form. I don't need you to prove it to me. I trust you. And if I happen to recruit someone who's not a grown-up, who I shouldn't have trusted, that's on me, actually. That's not on everybody else in the team. And that's a lesson I had to learn getting out of the structure of compliance that I'd experienced the whole of my legal career until I got to here. So, you know, I think you do have to look critically at why we're making people do these things and does it make sense?
And I think going back to your idea of you'd never been surveyed previously, and I think nobody goes out to become a leader or run a business or run a firm and think I'm going to act in a way that's going to annoy everybody or upset everybody, but things get in the way, the pressures build up, and you forget those things you set out to do. You forget to check in with people and you forget to make sure that the culture's sound. And I think it's just having that commitment to yourself that you're going to action some things to make sure that it's in the right direction. So you're going to make sure you check in when you say you're going to, or you're going to make sure you send that survey out when you say you're going to. And I guess that leads nicely onto my next question about inspiring future leaders and inspiring people who want to become compliance officers. Appreciate it's the responsibility of everyone in the firm, but for those people who want to be in that management position or a compliance officer, what are your sort of what characteristics make someone successful in that position?
So this is a great question. There are a few things. That you've got to find the right firm, first of all. And what I mean by that is you, as a compliance officer, need to have an awareness of your risk appetite. One of the most common reasons I see that people move on from compliance officer jobs, whether it's the firm asks them to move on or they decide to move on themselves, is because there's a misalignment between the risk appetite of the compliance person and the risk appetite of the firm. And a lot of firms don't do any work really to work out their risk appetite. They just can't. It's just one of them things. We'll have a partners meeting, we'll say, shall we do this? And it'll go around the table, and the partners themselves know who you'll need to convince it's a good idea and who will just go for it straight away. But all the time in partners meetings or management meetings, that's what's happening. There's this discussion about, should we take this risk? Everything that decision they make is about a risk, really. But they never actually kind of, in the recruitment process for compliance officers, test that. But this is basically the person you're putting in charge of your risk. You want them to be able to make decisions for you rather than bring every single decision to you at your management team. If you're putting one in, if you're growing to a size where you want to put a compliance manager in, you are going to want them to be able to make decisions at a certain level, and you're going to want to be able to trust that they're going to make the right ones. So one of the things that I say to my clients who are recruiting for the first time for that role, or even if they're recruiting for the next person, is make sure you're asking some questions where that person has to assess risk and see if they're going to come up with the same answer you would. If a partnership don't understand their risk appetite either, I would take them through an exercise where we've got maybe 7 or 8 questions, dilemmas, and we discuss them so we can find out where they are on the kind of continuum of risk appetite, from I'm not taking any risk to I'm really commercial and I'm prepared to pay the fine if I get in trouble. Like, everyone's on that spectrum somewhere. Most of the lawyers are down this end on the conservative side, but you do occasionally get some law firms that are right down the other end of, like, not that they don't care about compliance, but that they find compliance frustrating and they don't see why they shouldn't be able to do something. Now, if you're down here as a compliance officer and the firm you're working with is over here, you are going to have a big problem. And so being able to have that internal insight to yourself, be able to understand your risk appetite, you should do the same exercise yourself. Give yourself some scenarios and go, what would I do about this? When I find compliance officers are down this end of the scale, I mean, even like right butting up on the no risk end of the scale, sometimes that's because they don't feel safe in the business. They feel that if there's any compliance problems, they're going to get it in the neck. So what they do is they build a program so that there's no risk of the problems. So you get the business going, you're too risk averse, can't get anything done. You've got the compliance officer who go, I got no choice, because if I get something wrong, you're going to shout at me, because the culture here is you're going to blame me. And so that's how I do it. So again, it comes back to, for the compliance officer, you want to make sure it's the right fit for you, that you've got confidence you're going to be supported, and that you've got your risk appetite aligned. So that would be the first thing. But a thorough understanding of risk appetite and being able to make a really good judgment call. And you, as an interviewee, be asking questions about risk appetite to try and elicit them, because the firm probably won't have done it. The second thing is being approachable. So if you're a smaller law firm and you're looking which partner is going to be the new culp when the old one leaves, first question is, who do people trust? Who do people trust to be calm under pressure? Because compliance, well, we're interested in compliance. We put a policy in, we tell everyone what it is, and then we should test it, okay? And testing can be proactive testing, or it can be asking people to report back to you. If you're not trustworthy or they're not confident you're not going to go off on one at them, they're not going to tell you anything. and you're just making your job even harder. So sometimes I might see somebody who's quite combative in their style of lawyering. You know, they might be a really hard-nosed litigator who's like takes no prisoners. And you know, I'd be like, are you sure that's the right person for culp? Are you sure that's the right person for dealing with claims? Yeah, they might be the right person for resisting claims, but when you've had a claim and you feel like the world is ending because you've messed something up, you've let a client down, and you're scared of telling anyone, you want someone you can go to who's going to go, that's okay. This happens every day. Don't worry about it. As happened to me the first time it happened to me. I went in to see the partner. She's like, don't worry, Amy, it happens. I've got 3 there on the windowsill of mine. So, you know, everybody has them. You need somebody who's unflappable like that. Yeah, you can hand it over to the kind of, you know, Rottweiler hard-nosed litigator to reduce the impacts of it, absolutely. But the people in compliance have to be trusted, because you're asking people to be vulnerable with them, to tell them when things aren't happening. So yeah, calm under pressure, unflappable, and consistent with that. There's no point kind of putting your compliance officer hat on and going, yeah, tell me anything, it's all fine, it's amazing, and then they hear you whining about someone in the kitchen. You know, you've got to be trustworthy as well as unflappable.
Yeah, that's, I mean, to be fair, that lists a lot of the key characteristics of a great leader, just generally. But yeah, I hadn't really considered them having to be the trusted confidant of, like, if you've made a mistake and, like you said, you feel like the grounds want to swallow you up, who are you going to feel confident to talk to? Who is that figure that you can be really honest with and work through and not feel like you can't tell them and have to hide stuff? Again, that goes back to the compliance culture issue of hiding things, burying your head in the sand and hoping that it doesn't come back to bite you. Yeah, really great characteristics.
The hiding thing is like really important, because everyone, like, you see these claims, you see these disciplinary cases come out in the legal press periodically, probably once a fortnight. Some lawyers got in trouble for hiding something or covering something up. Okay. And one of the things that always interests me about that is, why did that lawyer not put the hand up? Why did that lawyer not say something? And why is nobody asking that question? Because they just end up at, this person's dishonest, and so they must be expelled from the profession or suspended or whatever. They're dishonest because they didn't do that. Instead of saying, what was the culture of the law firm that led this person who's, you know, say you're a newly qualified solicitor, these days you have invested upwards of 70,000, 80,000 pounds to become a solicitor, to go through uni, take on the law degree, all your loans and everything. You've invested a lot of money, your LPC costs, supporting yourself through all of that, right? Why would a person like that cover a mistake, who's invested that much in it, cover something up? Because they're really scared. That's why. So what's going on that they're really scared? Now, you know, could be really scared because it's nothing to do with the law firm. They could have had a really difficult childhood and just carry those issues with them. You know, might be nothing to do with the law firm. But quite a lot of the time, when you look at the statements made by these people, I was scared to get it wrong. I was under pressure to do billing. I was told not to bring problems to the boss's desk. And there isn't that support for them. And I think where we really should go with supporting people, we should be looking more at that. What accountability is there for a firm that has that? What have you done to try and make it all right? So lots of my clients I speak to about this, and I would, you know, if nothing else, make sure there's a peer network that people can go to. So when I started in the law, you got a supervisor. We all have supervisors, right? And you're supposed to go to them. Sometimes you're too scared to go to them. So when I was a fee earner, I used to have this pile of files. We all did. Back when we had paper files, right? You would go in and there'd be a pile of files, and all the Law Society gazettes you got every week were on the top of that, right? Because those were the files you were stuck on and you didn't look at, and they were gathering dust, right? And I had some, and you know, definitely claims that I've had in my career certainly were in that pile at one time or another when I was a bit stuck. I didn't know what to do and I left it too long, and you know, it became broken. And I used to go down, so there were about 40 fee earners in the department I was in, big personal injury thing. Every single one of them had this pile, if you looked at the thing. So I just said one day, why don't we have a meeting at lunchtime and everyone can just bring their pile of files, and instead of losing sleep over it at 3 o'clock in the morning, just bring it to the team meeting, you know, the associate meeting, we called it, I think. So it was no partners there or anything. So we didn't feel scared, but we were able to workshop through what we were stuck with, and then get an answer. Or the other thing I had with going with a few people was we'd just swap them. I'd pick up my files, give them to my friend Claire. She'd give me hers. What for me was stressful because I'd had a client who'd shouted at me that day and I was scared of getting it wrong. To Claire, she didn't have that angst about the file. So she just was able to move it on because and get past my mental block and me with her. And, you know, just there's some really easy tactics to deploy. These are not rocket science, like I said before, but they're just sitting in the seat of somebody who's scared, feels, you know, because you set off in your career, you've made, especially now you made that massive investment into it. There's high stakes that you're successful. But people are human and we all make mistakes. So if you're like, oh my God, I'm so scared, I won't get qualified, they won't give me a job after I qualify if I tell them about this, or I won't get promoted if I tell them about this. If you've got that mindset and the firm hasn't undone that, because the experience of getting the job in the law firm in the first place creates that mindset, that scarcity mindset, because it's so hard to do that you are scared. So even if your law firm, you don't think you've got a problem with that, this is not necessarily anything you've done. It's about the experience of the person before you get them and where their head's at. So in induction training, for example, with trainees, anyone new to the firm, I'd be saying, listen, mistakes happen. That's what we have professional indemnity insurance for. I mean, please try not to make it any worse, but there is insurance, right? So just tell me what it is. 90% of the time I can sort it out without it turning into a claim and affecting the premium or anything. But certainly if you don't tell me about it and I find out about it, then we've got a whole other issue. It's disciplinary. So just come along and tell me. And one of the stats I used to share with the trainees, and I still think this is true, is in our firm anyway, over the course of a year, 1 in 4 of our lawyers would have a circumstance to notify. So they might not all turn into claims, but something that's gone wrong or has the potential to have gone wrong, we had. So, you know, you're sat in a room with 12 people, 3 of them in that year will have something to notify, or you will every 4 years, whichever way you want to look at the data, right? But it's like, you're not the first, you won't be the last. And the quicker you tell someone, you know, that hole you want to jump into and hide, as soon as you've told someone, that hole kind of goes, because you start to, it's like the first time it happens to you, they're like, oh, it's like a secret club. Like you think, oh, no one gets anything wrong because no one really likes to talk about it. And that's why I talk now. I didn't for the longest time, Amy. I never told anyone about it. I was so scared and ashamed. And what would people think of me, especially running a business talking about compliance? If I told them I made mistakes in the past, what would they think? But then I realized it needs the leaders to talk about the mistakes that they've made for people to feel that they can come forward and say. And so, yeah, I am very open and honest, both as a boss now. If I made a mistake, I'll tell them. I'm like, I'm really sorry, I made this mistake. And as a, you know, as when I was a fee earner, when I had people reporting to me, I would be really open about it with them. And now I'm open about it with the whole world, because I just think that our junior lawyers need to see role models that are prepared to be vulnerable like that and know that that's the right thing to do. Otherwise we are, the mental health impact on the lawyers from not being able to have that confidence is massive. It was a whole other kettle of fish.
Yeah, like you said, the pressure that everyone's under, personally and professionally. So you're under pressure from your boss with targets. You're under pressure with all the compliance fines. You're under pressure from the client yelling at you and, you know, wanting this way or that. But you're also under pressure personally. Like you said, you've made this investment. Perhaps your family think you should be in this position or that position, and the pressure is just huge. And then when you do make a mistake, it's splashed all over articles, and you're ridiculed and held to the stake. And it's just, yeah, it's a lot to take on, and especially for someone joining and their career, you need that backup. You need somebody who you can trust to chat with. And I think that the word vulnerability is key for a good leader, and especially someone who's going to be dealing with people and dealing with compliance. I think that's absolutely key. You mentioned a lot there, which linked to your point in our previous conversation about understanding why things go wrong and having that root cause analysis, because I think you mentioned last time you don't want that answer to be human error, because that's not good enough. You need to get right to the root cause of that. And I want to sort of just take a techie angle just for now, because obviously, you know, case management software, but Teal also offer a Teal tracker, is it called? A compliance tracker.
Yeah,
and I guess I just wanted to talk about the impact and the importance of having those tech tools in helping you keep the control and those mechanisms in place, but also understanding why things go wrong in the first place. We're all human, things are going to go wrong. So what's tech sort of impact or role in that?
So one thing that I noticed really early on was I used to share the office of the lady who had to do all of the data for our professional negligence claim renewal. So, and it was just emails from all over the business, you know, where's that one up to? And the case management system didn't cater for managing that. So, you know, she had complaints in one filing cabinet, claims in a different one. It was before breaches, but I imagine she'd have breaches now, you know, cold coffer breaches in another one, and getting them all together, it was just all over the place. And when I speak to compliance officers now, they do get notified of these things, most of them anyway, but through email. And that just sits in an inbox. I don't know about yours. I keep cleaning my inbox down, but it's back up to 2,000 now. You know, it's just, how do you keep on top of it? So, and one of the things that I realized was that the data was so compartmentalized. The complaints handling person had a load of data, the COLP had a load of data, the data protection person had a load of data, as did the coffer, but they were never looking at it holistically over the business because they couldn't collate it. And so that's where the idea of tracker came from. So obviously law firms have got to keep all sorts of registers for all sorts of things for compliance, to demonstrate compliance. But the magic is, once we've got it all in one place, we can start to analyze it and start to bring out trends. So if you've got 2 complaints in about, you know, failing to call a client back, you've got 2 claims as a result of the same thing, and you've got, you know, data breaches because they didn't ring the client and check. So you've got this issue with communication with the client, okay, whether it's resources or it's just actually wanting to do it. If you could see that communication featured in 100% of the issues that you'd had, or whatever it was, you would know that's the thing to fix. Because this data, without collating it in the tech, is so fragmented, you actually are guessing at what to fix. When you put it all together, you can start to see that. So that's what we've done on Tracker. So on Tracker, all of, you know, registers are filled in, all your breaches. We have something called a what's happened form. It's incident reporting, but we decided on purpose not to call it an incident form, because we wanted to our mantra is, it's curiosity, not blame. So just tell me what happened. Just tell me what happened. Curiosity, not blame. Because if I say incident or breach report, people are like, feel a bit sick, you know.
Yeah.
Just tell me what happened and we'll sort it out. So it's a what's happened form. You fill it in and it auto notifies, it populates the register and notifies the relevant compliance person that they've got something to do, something to look at, investigate. Once I've investigated it, we have built into the tech something called our root cause analysis process. And it's using actually an engineering technique called 5 Whys. I think it was Toyota or someone, a car manufacturer came up with it, but it's genius. You just ask why something happened 5 times and you'll really get to the nub of it. But if you ask what happened once, just one time, why did that happen? The answer usually is human error. Okay? I can't write a policy or procedure for human error. I need to figure out what the circumstances were that meant that that highly trained, professional, diligent person made the mistake that they made. So human error, yeah, you can have it for 1 why or 2 why, but I'm going to ask you 5 whys. Why did they do that then? So missed a hearing date. Why did they do that? Didn't put it in the diary. Why didn't they do that? Didn't understand how to use the diary. Why didn't they do that? They didn't go to the training. Why didn't they do that? We didn't enforce training. Once you get there, you get right to the nub of the issue, and that's something you can do something about. So yeah, as far as I know, firms may anecdotally look at it, but they don't use it by way of data. And then when we've got that data across the business, all of the different types of breaches, all the different things, we can then surface, look, it seems to us that not prioritising time for people to attend training is causing you 72% of your issues across the business. So maybe that's where we should look. How do we make sure we carve out enough time for people to attend the training that they need? Otherwise, we're just guessing. So that's what we built. So that because the ability to gather the data and then analyze it, and we've actually incorporated AI into that to help drill down onto what the actual causes are and then analyze it and reflect back to the firm where the problems are. Interestingly, sorry, I was just going to say that we have 13 ultimate root causes it goes into. So as you're going through the process, all of the minutiae of didn't fill the diary and didn't go to the training, all of that's captured. But at the end of it, it falls into kind of a hopper of one of 13 things. Because, you know, you could analyze to death something and make it really complex. We've got to bring it back to something that's usable. And yeah, poor culture is actually one of those 13 categories that you can end up with. I
was going to say, what the data that comes out of that and the analysis will ultimately, and I assume, link to one of your 6 C's of compliance, because you're talking about perhaps if like the commitment to training, well, that's commitment. You didn't say you were going to do it, therefore you didn't do it, therefore we need to ensure that's part of the process and the policy. So yeah, those 6 C's I can imagine then align. And you said compliance.
You need the data. This is the culture. Thing. You need the clarity. You know, cog number 1, you need the clarity. You haven't got the data, so you don't know, you're guessing. So you're just blind, leading the blind, really. And you're my concern is, especially for the small law firms, their resources are so tight they can't afford to spend the money on the wrong thing.
Yeah, definitely.
You do that, you know, you think, oh, I need to do this training this time, or you overestimate the impact of your training, for example, so you skip it. You're waiting for it to go wrong. It's too late then when it's gone wrong, you know.
Yeah.
File reviews is another thing that we have in Tracker, where same logic, really. Collect all the data from the file reviews, then we can really start to see what is the particular bit that 72% of the firm are having a problem with. Why is that? Is it because they don't understand the importance of, you know, recording the conflict check properly, whatever the thing is we've checked, you know? Because it's all been done manually in the past, or it's just, if they have done it, they've kind of recorded it in spreadsheets, so they haven't built the reporting or the analysis of it. There's basically data sat there that's super valuable to you to make sure you spend your compliance resources appropriately, but you just can't tap into it. That's what I built Tracker for, really.
Yeah, small law firms have to get their bang for their buck for the money that they invest and also the time that they invest, and having data and legal tech to bolster that and do the heavy lifting is going to give you the bang for your buck. Now, I couldn't have the chair of the Law Society's Money Laundering Task Force in front of me without talking about AML compliance, and we did talk about fines at the beginning, so I'll have to this will be our last question here to talk about what are your tips to ensure that law firms avoid fines, and or what should they be doing now? How should they be preparing to make sure that they're doing all that they can, even with minimal resource, minimal budget?
Yeah, so if you'd have asked me this question years ago, I'd be like, what fines? What are you talking about? Nobody ever looks. You know, it was very rare that anyone ever knocked on your door. It's not rare now. For kind of mid-market firms, those that are doing a spread of conveyancing, private client, corporate work, it's kind of full service local law firms. I don't have any accurate data on this. I'm certainly not saying this is the Law Society's opinion. I think looking at the risk factors, the number of firms that there are, it's probably a 10% chance in any given year you might get that knock on the door. So it's not a if, I don't think. It's probably more like a when. And even if you've had a visit, doesn't mean you're off the list for like 10 years. I know some people who've been visited every 2 years for the last 6. So, you know, and it's not because it's just because they keep coming up on the risk profile. It's not that they're doing anything desperately wrong. So that, don't assume they're not coming. First point, because they probably are at some point. Secondly, one of the things that the SRA said a couple of years ago in one of their reports was that every firm that they disciplined had not had an independent audit. Now, I would say this, wouldn't I, because I sell them, but you don't have to do it externally. An independent audit can be done internally. An independent audit is literally part of the consistency cog. Do you know if it's working? That's all it is. Don't make it complicated. Keep it simple. all you're doing is testing it's working. Now, the problem is if you are a kind of MLCO that's kind of just a fraction of your time, how do you know if you've done it right in the first place? That's the first problem we've got. And then are people actually following it? In our experience, and this is reflected by the SRA, probably between 40 and 50% of people aren't actually doing it on the files that you think they're doing. You don't want the SRA to be the first person to tell you that. So look for an audit. The other thing I would say about audits is the market for audits, the people that are kind of selling audits. There's all kinds of weird and wonderful combinations of things that people are doing. You're putting this time and effort, and your staff's time and effort, and your ability to sleep at night if the regulator knocks on the door in this audit. So make sure it's thorough. Don't be tempted to skip it with something that sounds amazing because it's cheap. What you're wanting to do is really three things. Number one, you're wanting to make sure the policies and procedures are right. So you could sit, if you wanted to do it yourself, or you can't have the person who wrote the policies and procedures doing it because that's not independent. But you could give someone the legal sector affinity group guidance and your policy and say, tell me if it's right. You could do that yourself. That's one way of doing it. That's what we do. We take your policies and procedures, take our experience, go, that's not right. That can't possibly work. Are you sure that's right? So that's the first thing. Check your infrastructure, your policies and procedures are compliant first. Next job, do your staff know two things? The policies and procedures and the relevant factors for their area of law. Would they understand the risks if they come across them? So just asking one person in a firm with 100 lawyers probably not going to give you the assurance that just means that one person does. That's why we ask a variety of people. You're going to want to probably target people from each department because especially if you're doing different training for each department, you're going to want to make sure the training is working. That's what you're asking about. And then the third thing is look at some files. Again, got to, imagine the number of files there are in a law firm at any given time, right? There could be 15,000 or something active files in a law firm. So just looking at two, which the regulator might do, in fairness. If the regulator comes, he might only look at 2 or 3 files. They're only there for a day and they're in and out. I have yet to see them say this, but I don't think that the regulator feel that the depth that they go to as a regulator is the equivalent of an independent audit. So if you do an audit, I think is that, don't think they're not coming, do an audit and then do what they say. Don't put it on the to-do list for later on. Just get on and do it because this is the most likely area they're going to knock on your door for. So you need to be regulator ready. So that's the second thing. The third thing is, even if you are doing audits, I would recommend regular testing, part of consistency, COG, in between. If you uncover a particular area on the audit, for example, say your matter risk assessment process not being completed very well, and as a result of the audit, you're going to tweak the process. You're either going to change the process, change the form, or roll out some training for them. Then don't forget to test that in about 3 to 6 months after that. Check that the thing you changed actually had the desired effect. Don't just hope it works. And because it's, and that's for any compliance. Like if you roll out any new compliance, this is what I'm saying about control frameworks. Let it bed in a little bit, test it. If it's not working, come back to the drawing board with a policy, train that out, test it again, and you'll eventually get there.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it goes back to that compliance area of making sure that everybody, the culture area of making sure that everybody is accountable and responsible for this, because especially in a small firm, whilst you'll have a compliance officer that's responsible for that, they need the reassurance and the confidence that people are going to take this seriously, and all these constant checks and all these things that need flagging proactively before it gets and becomes a problem. You need that team around you that are really bought into that, and to make sure that everyone's got each other's backs and this is what we're striving towards, that it becomes a value as part of your firm, just as it would be to make sure you service your clients with the greatest of quality, and exactly. You stick to the law and all of that great stuff, and that you make sure that you hold that protection. And everybody buys into that and takes that really seriously. Amy, I could pick your brains for hours, and I really appreciate your time today again joining us in this episode. I've learned a lot, and there's some really great best practices and tips in there that people can take away and do now and just really implement. And like you said, keep it simple, make sure we're not overcomplicating things, and get the bang for our buck out of the resource and money and time that we're putting into this. So thank you so much, Amy, for your experience and knowledge and sharing that with us today.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me on. As you can tell, I'm very passionate. I love talking about it.
I'll have to pick your brains again at some point. I think you mentioned there was potential book on the horizon or something that you'd been working on for a very long time.
There is,
so.
yeah, I have been working on Compliance That Works, the book, and a lot of the stories that I have and these practical tips. It's basically packed full of practical tips for you to look at your business and say, actually, is my compliance working? I actually do have a scorecard, so if anyone's interested and finds me on LinkedIn, I can send them the link to a self-assessment tool that I've got, the Compliance That Works scorecard. You can have a little go at it and see how likely from the answers your compliance program is to be working.
Oh, I love that. That's great. Yeah, we'll put notes in the description as well, just to make sure that you can find Amy on LinkedIn and get access to that. But yeah, thank you so much. And we'll be in talks when that book is out, I'm sure.
Yeah, I will see you then. Take care, Amy.
Thanks, Amy. Bye.
Thanks.